Season 4, Episode 10 of Baseball Pitching the Fix. This is part 2 of your Fall Ball Reboot, updating your fall baseball program using science. If you missed part 1, no worries. You can jump right in and listen to part 1 afterward. In this special episode, baseball pitching motion troubleshooter Angel Borrelli puts the pitcher back into the pitch. Let's go. Here we are, Season 4, Episode 11 of Baseball Pitching the Fix. We had Part 1 last week, and now we have Part 2 of our Fall Ball Reboot, using science to update your fall baseball program with Angel Borrelli. And Angel, how is it going on the West Coast?
Everything's going great. How are you doing out there?
Oh, things are good. We've got really nice warm weather, and things are getting seasonal, and the summer ball is starting to wind down, which means that fall ball is on the way, which is why we're doing these very special episodes for all the coaches for the Fall Ball Reboot.
Yep.
And in part 1, we discussed some old school practices with running and throwing you did a great job of putting the coaches, giving the coaches some great information on how they can update their fall ball programs. And now we're going to go into part 2. But before we go into part 2, we did get a question. Someone sent you an email and had a question about something about the running in part 1. Could you go into that question and help everyone out?
Yes, one of the coaches wrote in and he was saying how much the program was helpful, but he thought that I was saying that the running is an anaerobic activity, that baseball is an anaerobic activity. And while it's not really important that you understand all those terms, it's more important to understand what you have to do. I do realize a lot of you do have some background, and also you do want to sometimes look things up. So it wasn't clear to him, and I thought if it wasn't clear to him, it's probably not clear to a few others. So I wanted to explain something. And this really and truly is one of the most important things that I want you to get, that you can actually change your pitchers and your explosive runners into being slower if you don't understand what I'm going to talk about. So whenever we are training, we're creating an adaptation inside the body. It's the invisible thing that you have to be concerned about. So on the outside, you're having someone run, and maybe you're punishing him, so you want him to run poles, and you see him dragging his butt, and you're happy because he's suffering. Well, on the inside, the body is making changes to accommodate what he's doing, because that's what our bodies do. That's how cool they are. Now, if you have this guy or your pitchers running a certain way all the time, when the body realizes you need that skill to be able to do it, it starts to make adjustments on the inside of the muscle. It changes fiber types, it brings some in, it excludes some, it creates a different chemistry. And listen, this is a very street version of how complicated it is, but I want to make it understandable. So when I said to you last week, and when I say to all you coaches, please don't have your pitchers run poles. Please don't have your players running poles. Don't have any of your team running poles. Don't have them running miles. Please don't have them come back and time them on a mile, telling them they have to be able to do it in 6 minutes or 7 minutes. Don't even have them do the mile, because you're not going to get a good sense of what kind of player he's going to be. And you have other markers that can tell you how in shape he is. You know, having him run a 40, having him run a 60, having him run a 20. And if you want to do measurements there and take times, that's the way you want to do it. But if you remember correctly, I said the reason why we're doing these short bursts is because it's a short burst sport. The other thing I said that's important is you have to have full recovery. Now that's the part that delineates this energy system from the anaerobic. So anaerobic, an means without, and aerobic is, think of it as having oxygen, training without oxygen. So if you're out of breath from running a really fast, let's say 100, and you turn around and you say to the guy, okay, you've got 15 seconds, I want you to run it again, and he's out of breath, One is he's not going to run it as fast. Two is because he's out of breath and you didn't let him recover, he's going to go into more oxygen debt. And when the body figures out that you're running in an oxygen debt, it actually does some things inside the muscle that take up real estate. It ends up putting in systems that help you get rid of the lactic acid you're developing. Baseball does not develop lactic acid. Get that out of your head. Lactic acid is always being created, but it's being removed. If you do anaerobic stuff, you have them running more than 15 to 20 seconds. Actually, at 15, you're getting into a little bit of trouble. If you have them run more than 15 seconds, or you have them run out of breath, you are creating an environment inside the body where the body's going to go, whoa, we need to be able to remove all this breakdown from this anaerobic running, and it does things inside. And if you do it once in a blue moon, it's not going to do too much adaptation. But if the body figures out and you try to train the guys this way, you're developing the wrong pathway. So when they get on the field and perform, all the training you did, even if you developed that pathway, it's not even being used. So I want you to be clear about the distance, and the running needs to be no longer than 15 seconds. It needs to be full out. As soon as they're warmed up, they need to go full out. This isn't a run at 70% thing, maybe for your warm up, but it has to have complete recovery. So when you're running your team, and they all run, let's say the first run, let's say they're all warmed up and they're ready to go 100%. And let's say you're going to have them run a 60, which would be, for a position player, he's hit a double. He's got to get to second base. Okay, you have them run full out. They all stop at the 60. They're all down there waiting. You tell them, start your next bout when you are ready. Not every guy is going to recover the same. And the one that recovers, that takes the longest, don't look at him like something's wrong. He may have actually been the fastest, so he used more energy. So you have to evaluate not by what you're seeing, but by maybe the time, and also just look at them running. We can tell when someone's hauling butt or not. And that's how you're going to know your fast runners. And pitchers, even though they may be POs and they're not swinging a bat, they still need to be able to get to first base fast. So running for them really needs to be, they need to be doing 20s, okay? And they need to be doing 20s full out, where they're running through the stops so you get the energy system developed. And then you need to do skill specific running where you're saying, okay, go full out, but you need to stop at 20. Why? Because they have to stop at the bag, right? So you want to think about the distances that are used, the situations they're used in, especially for a pitcher, and then you want to let them just run it to develop the pathway, and then have them make it more specific. That's why I said last week, take the guys out on the track, your position players, for 60 yards. Then the next time, have them do the 60, but from the plate to second base. How beautiful is that? So that's what we mean by the pathway that's appropriate for pitchers. And by the way, it's called the ATP pathway. ATP is an acronym for a very long word. But if you look up ATP energy system, you'll see very clearly specific type of fiber. You'll see the seconds that it works in, like it's from 0 to, it'll probably say 12 to 15 seconds. And then if you look up anaerobic, you'll see, that's for things that are of a longer duration. They're actually different gas tanks. You want to train the one that's appropriate. And guess what? People are attracted to the sport they are built for. It's not an accident that your linemen are all huge. It's not an accident that baseball players kind of look alike physically. So the deal is, if they're drawn to a sport like baseball, they are probably wired for it. So when you train them for what they're wired for, they get better. You give a pitcher an assignment to run a mile, it will be ugly. And if it isn't, I would question whether he's a power pitcher or not. So Does that make sense to you, Joe? Because I want to make sure everybody gets that. The most important part, they've got to have oxygen when they do their bouts, and the bouts should be no longer than 15 seconds. Did I get that more clear this time?
Oh, I think it's crystal clear, and it's the exact opposite of what we did 20, 25 years ago. It's especially the part about resting in between, like that. As coaches and players, in my day, it was all right. You run as fast as you can, and then you get back on the line and you run again, like even if you're out of breath. So it's very different. It's a very different way of doing things.
Yeah, and while we're on the topic, before we get to part two, I want to just say one more thing that I didn't say last week because I want to talk today about some of the mistakes I see that you coaches don't in any way do intentionally. And listen, it was probably done to you. But just to clear this up, number one, please don't use running as punishment. Okay, I did a whole show on this last season because I watched some guys at a school that I'm at, and the coach I told him I dedicated a podcast to. You went and listened. He said, "Oh my God, I'll never do it again." I know you want to punish them sometimes. I know sometimes they're slacking, and you feel like you got to get the message across. You coach the way you want to coach, but find a different way to do it, or say, "All right, you guys, tomorrow we're running." But not after practice, because after practice, they're tired. So they can't run that 20 full out. So let's say you're going to run the way I suggest. It has to be 100% because you're teaching them. You want your pitcher to throw 100%, right? You want your hitter to go 100%. They have to develop the 100% effort in this little one moment where they have to swing a bat one time, get to first base one time, or just throw a hard pitch. They can't practice at 100%. Their 100% after one of your fabulous practices is probably 50 to 60%. So the running should be done separately from the practice, or it can be done actually before the practice, because if you stay within 15 seconds and you give them full bouts, they're not going to get fatigued, not in the same way. And by the way, when they are fatigued and you can tell, then you know you've run them too much. Okay, everything is the minute the pitcher or your player's tired, stop him from running. If you have to elicit some sort of punishment, say, "Okay, guys, everybody at the field tomorrow 15 minutes early." Or tomorrow when you get here, we're going to do this. Or I want everybody out here at 7 a.m. Isolate it. Still issue the punishment, quote unquote, but do it at a time where you can kill two birds with one stone. No pitcher wants to be at the field at 7 a.m. That might be punishment enough. But at least you're sticking with the format of having them do something to remind them that this is serious and you need their commitment, but at the same time you're not damaging them. So please don't have pitchers run. Don't have your team scheduled to do running when they're tired, because you will make them slower. And if you're going to use running as punishment, don't do it at a time when they're going to be fatigued as well, because remember, you're creating adaptation. Do not make your athletes less powerful than they are. And believe it or not, the systems you use to train them can do that. And ask any strength coach. You're only as good as your strength coach. You're only as good as the people who do your programs. We have the ability to ruin an athlete, and that's why it's so important to understand these things. So that I'm done with the running topic. But anybody who has any questions, and if I haven't been clear, please feel free to contact me, because this is an important thing.
Angel, I want to ask just one more question about the running.
Okay.
Because I know that there are coaches out there who believe that they need to have their players do long distance running and their pitchers to do long distance running in order to have enough gas in the tank to pitch 9 innings or to play in a doubleheader or things like that. So could you just reassure everyone that you don't need to do long distance running in order to be in condition to pitch a full baseball game or for a position player to play a doubleheader?
Yeah, that would be like saying that we all need to do long distance running. So when we wake up in the morning, we can actually move around all day until we go to bed. That's the analogy. An endurance athlete is an athlete who is doing something repetitively for a continuum and an amount of time that exceeds, 15 seconds, a minute to 2 minutes. Once you get past 2, 3, 4 minutes, you're in what we call an endurance mode. And they look very different in their muscles. So the marathon runner, he's got to run 24, 26 miles. He's an endurance athlete. The pitcher who is throwing a pitch one every 20 seconds is an ATP power athlete. He needs, I'll use the word endurance in it, but I'm putting a word before it. He needs, I'm not even going to say power endurance. I'm going to say he needs the ability to repeat power performances. Meaning he's got a gas tank that is full of one burst little pellets of energy. And that gas tank has to have 1,000,000 pellets in it. And if it's got 1,000,000 pellets in it, every time he throws a fastball, boom, he is using one of those. The cool thing is, the more you train that system, the more that system knows how to replenish. And guess what? When he throws his next fastball, he's not even depleting his energy pathway. He's actually already created some recovery in it. But picture it as being used. So that bank of pellets will be used each time. So it's dependent on that bank being solid. You get that bank solid by doing everything. Like, that's why we have pitchers train a certain way in the gym. Baseball players train a certain way. Football players train this way too, guys. Think about it. Wide receivers, even when they're running 100, they're hauling butt. They're in the ATP system, okay? You don't see them out there running miles because it makes them slow. It's one boom bang and then that's it. So you need the ability to repeat singular movements and repeat them over again. Just like I need to be able to get up from this chair, go to the kitchen. Then I need to be able to go down the stairs and go to my car. You're repeating different movements. So we don't really, if we were running on a tough energy system, we'd have to all train just to make it through the day. So don't get it confused. They're not out there boom, boom, boom. This is why you have to be careful when you have your guys in the hitting cage. You have to be careful the way you run your pens. My guys throw their warm-up pen numbers, and then they take a break. And then we throw 15 pitches, 12 pitches at a time. Then they take a break. They throw 12 more. We take a break. And when I say a break, they only want to take about a minute. But it can be as long as you think they might be in the dugout between innings. Because guess what? What game has them throwing 80 pitches in a row? Now they're getting tired. Now, they're still in that ATP thing, but they're not really recovering and replenishing the same way. So you got to think about this. Think about what you see them doing. This is the same as a golfer. A golfer is in an ATP system. He doesn't have to run distance so he can make it to each hole. He has to be able to be powerful at each time he hits the ball. So an ATP system would be a tennis player serving, but the sport is not. The sport is anaerobic, and it's one of endurance. It's a whole different kind of thing. So they have to train differently. But anything that's singular, where you get recovery between. So the serve itself, if you were out practicing a serve, that would be one pathway. But that tennis player needs to train as an endurance athlete. He's the one that needs to train out of breath. So think about that comparison. Now, does that make sense, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, as an old school baseball guy, this is really like putting my head, it's spinning. I don't understand any of this, but I'm going to take heart and try to adjust the way that I've been doing my conditioning going forward.
And that's why I think you want to listen to people. I've gone to school for this, the physiology, exercise physiology. Many people go off into that, but we all who have masters in the sport that in the science that I have a degree in, we have to study that. Basic level and undergraduate school, then a more advanced level, then an even more advanced level. Because if you don't understand the way cells work, see, we have to understand things from the ground up, from the deepest part of the inside up. We have to understand the cells, the blood, the this, then the muscle fiber, then the muscle itself, then the bone, then the tendons, then the ligaments, then to the outside. We've got to understand it all. It's complicated. But what you want to do is find people you can trust and then listen to what they say. And you can trust me because I think, no, I don't make stuff up. This is anything you'll find in a textbook. And this was the passion that drove me to want to take care of pitchers, because running and seeing what pitchers were doing and comparing it to what I was learning as a student, I said, wait a minute, why are those guys I see running around the track? And that was my first thing that started me going, pitchers need somebody to help protect them. And that's the truth. Running was actually going to be the first topic of my graduate thesis. I changed into something else, but this is how serious I was. And it was the error in running. And the thing is, I would watch the pitchers out on the track. They were dragging their butt. And I'm looking, going, how can they be getting anything out of that? So it's a serious thing. So trust me on this, guys. Think about it. Look it up if you need to, but you don't need to understand it. You just need to take my advice. And guess what? You will see the results, and you're going to have a lot of happy campers, because they'll be like, wow, that was fun. It's just like the way someone feels when they have an in the park home run. They cross the plate. It's like they feel awesome. Now, if they were running that in a mile, they wouldn't feel so awesome when they were done. They'd be collapsing. So you'll notice that it fits and it looks like baseball, and that's how you'll know it's right.
Right. I'm sure if there are some really old school baseball guys who remember Johnny Sane. Johnny Sane was a great pitcher way back in the day, and then he became a pitching coach for a long time, and he did not make his pitchers run. And when people went to ask him, they said, "Well, Johnny, how do your pitchers get in shape if they're not running?" And he said, "Well, you don't run the ball to the plate." So I think he would be a big fan of this way of getting people in shape.
Exactly.
Let's now move on to part 2 of our fall ball reboot. So Angel, I'm sitting on the edge of my seat now. Tell me what's happening.
Well, I'm glad you're sitting on the edge of your seat, and I kind of already touched on it. I want to call this segment something dear to my heart, putting the pitcher back into the pitch. This was the name of one of the chapters in my graduate thesis, because I felt when I was studying things about the systems and about mechanics and about body movement, I was feeling like, wow, where is the pitcher and all the stuff I see being done? It's sort of like they're out there they're just an arm that's out on the mound. There's almost like no personalization. And I'm not saying that all you coaches do this, and I'm also not saying that anybody does it intentionally. So please hear me on that. But just the system of baseball and the way that baseball is, even from the top on down, it can be where we start to look at people like machines. And I think this is just probably something that happens in society. But anyway, my passion was to put the pitcher back into the pitch. Let's really think about him as a person. And of course, with the work I do dealing with the pitching motion, where I don't have to spend an hour with him teaching him how to throw a strike. I mean, I am indirectly, but I'm looking at him, not the plate. I'm teaching him about his body. So it's a very personal thing to his motion, to the way he moves. It's a very personal thing. And of course, that is the work that I do. So what I want to do in this segment is I want to talk to all you coaches about the very precious time that we have right now. Fall is a very precious time for a pitcher, because and a lot of what I'm saying you can apply to all your players. They played their spring. They mostly go off and play summer ball because they either need more innings or they want to be seen. And I'm talking about, the college level, the high school level for sure. They want to be seen. They need to get their stats up. Maybe something happened in the spring, but we know they go from spring into summer. And then we know that the eye is on the ball for the spring again. So you've got actually 2 components going on in between the end of summer, which is now, and the spring, which is fall and winter. And even though we know you're not able to be on the field at certain times and doing things, that the beauty of this is that you can create something right now for the next few months that you'll never have an opportunity to do again. And if you don't handle the next few months correctly, the minute November gets around the corner, which is when pitchers who are in the off season should be picking up a ball so they can be ready, really ready by February 1st, which is when I feel every pitcher should be absolutely ready, and he needs those 3 months to do that. I feel that when you're looking at the fall, you have to make all the right decisions so that in November you're not saying, wow, spring is just around the corner, and then you're starting to work on things that you didn't plan for. So right now is a precious time. And most coaches that are calling me right now are asking me, how do I know if a pitcher should pitch in the fall? Or how do I know what to do with my guys? I need some guidelines to make decisions. And last year, I got so many calls, which all you coaches who called me, you know how much I loved it, because there were coaches then calling me in the spring and summer saying they had the best season ever because your spring season starts now. And it might start now by you're just saying to a kid, you know what, I don't want you throwing. Or guess what, you need to throw now. But then I'm going to give you a little more time off in November. You have to take each pitcher separately. So what I want you to start today is to commit to not having a cookie cutter approach with your pitching staff. And what that's going to require, it's going to require what I get to do every day of my life, which is for 1 hour, I have a pitcher in my hands, just him. I'm looking at him, I'm talking to him, I'm listening to him, I'm tuning into him, and I'm tapping into what's going on with him. And it's from all the information he gives me that I know my next move with him. And when they call me themselves to ask what they should do in the fall, I'm doing the same exact thing. The information you can get from a pitcher is amazing. And I'm with one-on-one all the time. I have a group when I'm in the gym. There's 9 or 10 of them, and I know the different the demands of that. But you have a staff, and I'm going to recommend that you make a list immediately. You send them out an email. You set up appointments with them, and you meet with each one of them for set up a half an hour. Have them come into the dugout one at a time with nobody else around. You cannot prepare yourself for the W in the spring if you don't tune in to each pitcher individually, because something will get by you. And the things that'll get by you are the things that you didn't know got by you. That's what the things that get by you do. You don't know you missed something. But if the information you're going to get, and see, all of you coaches are, you're able to look at a game and in your head see a play when a guy's on first and a guy's on third, and you call it's amazing what you guys do. Just think if you had all that kind of information about a pitcher so you could know exactly what he's going to do the next few months. This guy's going to sit out. This guy's going to work. This guy needs this. This guy needs that. And just think of the response you're going to get from the pitcher knowing that somebody actually took the time to investigate. And I'm going to tell you in a second what you need to investigate. But believe me, working with each one individually will make your team more solid. And let's face it, the pitching staff is so important because they can blow a game. And what you don't want is to end up with something that comes up in the spring that you had no knowledge of. And that's why your time now is to get to know them, but also for you to actually, this is a chance for you to get to know yourself as a coach. I'll give you ideas of things you need to know, and you're going to be making a list, I hope. But I know that you're going to add things to it that I didn't think of because you're a coach. And you will start to feel more secure. And your pitchers are going to respond to it. So far, Joe, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So now, here's what you need to know right now about every pitcher that is going to be coming to your first fall ball meeting. And hopefully you will have a chance to meet with your pitchers before then, or maybe the first fall ball meetings when you're going to announce your game plan. And you may even decide to do this with your position players, but you have to do it with your pitchers. Your first job is to find out what condition their condition is in. Because unless you ask, you are not going to know. So here's what you need to know. And these are the questions I ask each pitcher. I might see him twice in 1 week, and I'm still asking him the same questions. So you always need to just start out with, when is the last time you pitched in a game? That's going to bring forward whether or not he played during the summer. Then you're going to ask about how his performance was. And you need to know how his performance was the last season he was with you, which would have been the spring. And when he tells you about how his performance was in the summer, you need to be calculating or making notes. So when you walk away from him, you get a sense of, did he improve in the summer or did he go downhill? If he had a lot of trouble, you need to find out why. And then you need to determine if it's something that requires rest so he can start fresh, or if it's something that requires work. Because pitchers sometimes need work and they don't have the luxury of taking off September and October. While their arm is still in condition, sometimes they have to work on things. So you've got to start to look at comparisons of performance. And I had a pitcher that did really well in the summer, way better. He did well in the spring, but his velocity went way up in the summer. And when I asked him why he felt his velocity got better in the summer than it was in the spring when he was pitching more, his answer blew me away. So you will hear answers that will give you information, and then you know how to deal with that pitcher. So you've got to find out his condition. You've got to ask him about soreness. And he's got to feel free to tell you. You need to say, so how's your body doing? And if he says, well, I was having some trouble with my shoulder, but it feels fine now, you have to earmark that and you have to watch him, because he may be somebody not being totally forthcoming, but you do need to know if he sustained any injuries. You need to understand, of course, the things you would ask. How many innings did he pitch? And, did he pitch in the spring? And also, how's he going to be used? And ask him about his energy level. If he's somebody who feels like he needs not to pitch during the fall, then that's something you have to listen to. But you may have to be the one that's going to pull the plug on it. So the most important thing for you to do is to ask all the questions that are going to tell you what he should do in the upcoming months. If it's time off, if it's getting throwing, or if he's going to just strength train. The other thing that you have to do is when you are and I suggest creating a form for some of the basic things. It's just like I have when someone calls me. When someone calls me on the phone, I'm going to know their height and weight, all the types of pitches they throw, if they're a righty or a lefty, their travel ball team, their high school team, their college team. I'm going to have some sense. I'm getting a sense of who they are. You need to have a sense on a form of who they are too, and they're in for very important reasons. So first of all, you need to, when you're sitting with every pitcher and you're finding out his condition, you need to first ask what other sports he's playing right now or what sports he plays. Believe it or not, you might think you know your pitcher, and he might say, oh, well, during the fall I'm going to play soccer while I'm, playing. I mean, things that you, when you hear, might say, no, you can't do that. You have to decide. Or just knowing that that's what he's doing, which can help you shift decisions. You have to know if he's training or not in a gym. Because if you're sitting looking at a kid who said he's had a lot of soreness and he looks like he weighs 110 pounds wet, you may know that you may say to him he's got to get on a strength program. And that may be something you can organize with the team or whatever. But you need to have ideas in your head of what this kid needs, and he needs to be aware of that if he's not himself. You need to ask him what other things he's been doing for his pitching. And let him feel free to tell you. He might have gone off in the summer and gone and done a weighted ball program. He might have gone off and done some crazy velocity program. He may have gone off and done something wonderful. Ask him what kinds of things he did, or if he's doing anything, and how he supports his pitching. Don't just assume you know that because a pitcher just finished travel ball or summer ball that he shut it down. You have pitchers that are crazy. They could say, oh, well, I got a call from my coach and he flew me into LA to pitch 2 innings. I mean, you'll hear stories that'll blow you away. So make sure you ask the questions, because you have to know the condition of your pitcher, not just what he's been through, but what he does. And then last but not least, you should have written down on a piece of paper, and you'll probably know this intuitively, is he a pitcher that if he swings a bat, does he swing a bat with his non-dominant pitching arm? Because then you've got a pitcher who's got extra stress on his pitching arm. You might intuitively go, oh, if he's a righty but he swings left, that's awesome. No, his pitching arm is always under the most stress when he's hitting if he hits it with his non-dominant arm. So that's the pitcher who you want to look at, and you want to say, well, what do you do for your hitting? And let's say he's pitching every day, or he's pitching twice a week, and he's hitting, like he says, I'm in the cage. This is the pitcher that's going to have an injury. So I worked with a lot of lefties that were right-handed swing hitters, and they all had shoulder problems. That's how I came to start to understand this. There was a day way back when I was naive, when I didn't even ask if they swung a bat with the other arm, because I just didn't. I don't even know if I thought it was important. I mean, this was a long, long time ago, but that is a very important feature. So these are the things you need to know as well. So if you see him sore in the shoulder, and he's in the batting cage all the time, and he's one of your best pitchers, that's when your lights go off, and you have to come up with what you think is going to be the most important thing for him to do. So I want you to get personal and tune in and tap in to your pitcher, each one of them individually, so you can make a decision as to what you're going to do. How does that sound, Joe, so far?
That sounds great. I'm just finishing the scribbling of the last one that you went through. I wrote down all this, so I have my list. I hope everybody else did the same thing, but they can always rewind and write all these down. This is good.
And then the last thing I want to talk about is, I think and this, actually, I know this, but I interviewed one of my favorite scouts from a major league team who I've been friends with for a long time, and I interviewed him on a show I did, probably 6 years ago. And he said, the show was about, what do you look for when you go out and see pitchers? And of course, he was saying the most interesting things. I mean, the obvious was the skill, but the way the pitcher carried himself, and the way, he seemed to respond to the team and how he got along. And, the things that are man things, guy things, the way he acts in certain situations. But the thing he said that I loved, because it's something that I did, but I didn't realize it was something so separate and unique. He said, I watch to see if a pitcher has a system. And he says, and sometimes I see the same pitcher more than once, especially if it's someone I'm following. And he says, I want to see that they get to the field, and the minute they suit up and they're ready to go, that they shift into a different zone. And I want to see that they do the same thing all the time. That they go maybe to the fence and they warm up their arm. Then they go out to the running, and then they do some running. And then they go and they do this, and then they do that. And I thought, you know what? That's exactly the way a strength coach works in the gym. You come in, you do certain things, you get ready, you do all this. You have systems. And of course, when I developed the warm-up program for my pitcher's arms and the recovery program, and also gave them calendars. I'm a big calendar person, so we always have calendars. They always know when they're throwing, etc. I realize that one of the reasons why I have success is not just this ability to be personal and to track each one of these little things that could contribute to their success or their demise, but also that I create a system for them. My pitchers are very relaxed, because they feel that everything's handled. Even if they get like 4 showcases that get scheduled in 2 months, and most pitchers will be going, oh my God. When I say, give me the dates, and then the next thing they come and they've got calendars. They say, okay, this week you're taking off. This week you're doing this. Now we got to get you back in for this showcase. Then you're doing this, blah, blah, blah. And before you know it, they're like, oh, awesome. And it's sort of like they don't have to worry about it. So you want to have systems. And by the way, the showcase thing is huge. You got to ask your pitchers, if they're, especially high school, if they're going to showcases. And what my pet peeve is, and I complain about this all the time, are some of the best schools have showcases in what should be an off season. So my pitchers who tell me, I've got a showcase in October, guess what? They're not taking the fall off, because they can't just pick up a ball 2 weeks before the showcase. So ask your pitchers. Don't think you know. You might have them set up for showcases, but you know their parents are out. I mean, I've got kids that go to so many, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's laughable. They fly in from one end of the country, just enough time to go to the other end to do a showcase, and I am sure they're not performing so at their peak output because of the fatigue and the flying. So ask your pitchers that as well. That's a huge deal because nobody wants to go to anything unprepared. That's how you get injured. So help your pitchers have a system. Create a system. Have all your players. You should tell your players they need to weigh in. They need to record their weights, and every night, in fact, I would have a chart. If I were a coach in a dugout, I'd have my pitchers and my recording their weight if I wasn't seeing them. My pitchers, they weigh in for me. Strength coaches sometimes do that with their athletes as well. But the first way you're going to know that you're going to have a team that is not ebbing at 100% is when your guys are losing weight. That's number one. So I would have them know that when they're not playing, they need to be training, they need to be eating, and they need to weigh in. You don't want anybody losing weight. Doesn't matter you're a baseball coach, that's what you say to them. Okay? Number two, you want the pitchers to have a system. Now, if you as a team adopt a system, I know plenty of coaches are doing my warm-up program, which, I think is absolutely the best. And why is it the best? Because it's based on science, and science is the best. I channeled science to you. If you do that one, fantastic. If you have another one, do something. But you say, guys, you get here, and then I want to see all of you up at the fence warming up your arm. Whether you're pitching or not, you're warming up your arm. Why? Because you're throwing a ball. Everybody plays catch. I don't know anybody who shows up at the field and doesn't play catch unless he's injured. Then you say, okay, and now we're going to do this. You get a system going. Then at the end of practice, you recover your arm. And my recovery program's outstanding. It is the only one on the market. So it's a great program. So that way you know when they leave, they're in one piece. They show up in one piece. They leave in one piece. And that's how you know when they come back, they're going to be in one piece again. If they show up 100%, they leave 90%, they show up 80%, then they leave 70%. I don't have to tell you where you're at in a few months. So you get this going now, and then you develop this system and you get it really, really sharp. And then when the season starts, you've got your plan already in place. Also, psychologically, the effect of having a system that pitchers follow is fantastic for them. And coaches, take the time to organize what your pitchers are going to do. The pitchers that are with you, sit down and organize their bullpens. Make sure if they're pitching twice a week. Try to have an organized day. Try to always teach about pitch counts and recovery for pitch counts. If you look organized, they're going to be organized, and you will get results. You will get results, and that's something strength coaches know. We have to be very organized about the way we design programs because you can fail miserably if you don't have a plan. And then you end up nowhere. And that is the wrong thing. And then the guys end up injured, and then they end up not performing well. So little things you do like that can be absolutely fantastic. So I want everyone to think about that and to and be very big on making sure that the pitchers are knowing that at any time they can come to you, and that you want to be about early detection, and remind them that a little bit of tweaking and soreness is usually the start of something bigger. So if you deal with it then, you can get a handle on it. And that's the way I want you coaches to start thinking about this upcoming season. Change a little bit, add a few things in, and then put your genius along with what I just shared, and make sure your program feels different to you this year. Because if you're listening to this podcast, it means you want more information, and you should be using more information because you're a little more educated than the coach who doesn't listen to things that come from science.
Wow. Well, I have a big list of things that I wrote down here, so I'm hoping everyone else did the same thing, because there's a lot of different things. I know a lot of coaches already do some of these things and have meetings with their players and their pitchers, but I think to actually take your advice and write everything down and maybe put it in a form where they have to actually answer all these questions, that might be a really good idea, because then you get a really comprehensive overview of what's going on with your players. And while a lot of coaches probably do this with new players like the freshmen, I think it's really important to make sure you do this with your juniors and seniors, the guys that you've been with for a few years, because you tend to think that you know those guys because you've been with them so long. And you, like you said, you'll be blown away sometimes if you just ask certain questions of, you didn't realize that they were going to this showcase or playing with, 3 different travel teams or whatever it is. But, when you're familiar with your players and you think you know them, you might not know them as well as you really do. So it's good to go through this exercise.
Yeah, and they love it. Listen, the one thing that all humans want is to be seen. We all want to be seen, we want to be heard, and we want to be understood. And I think that's why I have such success, because in baseball, it's not frequently that you can work so closely with one pitcher, and especially the gift of my pitchers being return clients. So I've seen some of them consistently for years, and they know I know them, and they know that I do not have a cookie cutter approach, and that is something that on some level it affects them in a positive way, and it gets results for me. And coaches, what you all want are results, and listen, they love to be on a winning team. So the more you structure everything for winning and help them be successful, the more successful you're going to be. So, and please, again, if any of you have any questions or need any help with this, please contact me. I'd be more than happy to help you, as I have many coaches last season, and I know it worked.
All right. I guess that's what we have for this episode of part 2 of the Fall Ball Reboot. And I think we got a lot of information here. Just to reiterate, if anyone has any questions for Angel, please reach out, angel@gymscience.com. So, Angel, anything else? I mean, I don't think we can add anything else to this.
No, I think that's it, and I thank everybody for listening, and I thank you so much as well, Joe.
Oh, thank you. I mean, this is tremendous. What a great value. Well, that's it for Season 4, Episode 10 of The Fix, Part 2 of the Fall Ball Reboot. If you didn't hear Part 1, you can go back and find it on iTunes, Stitcher, or however you get your podcasts. And if you have no idea what a podcast is, no problem. Just download our app. It's available on iPhones and on Android devices. Just go to the App Store and search for Baseball Pitching The Fix, and it'll come right up. It's a free app, so go ahead and download it. And if you like to get that warm-up and recovery program that Angel was talking about, or if you just like to find out what she does to take pitchers to the next level, you can visit her website, gymscience.com. For more about me, Joe Janish, you can visit fixingpitchers.com. You can also hit me up on Twitter @fixingpitchers. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this episode helpful, please pass it along to another pitcher, parent, or coach. And until next time, I wish you safe and effective performance on the pitching mound.